So, what are some of the stories that you tell yourself about yourself? How do those stories affect your mindset and even your behavior? I'm going to talk about all of that coming up. Stay tuned. Hey all, Janae here, also known as the Well-Rounded Black Girl. Excited to be back with another video. Welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you are new. I'm so happy to see you here. Today, as you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about stories. So when I say stories in this video, I don't necessarily mean your life story. I don't mean, everything that's happened to you from birth until present. When I say stories in this video, I'm more so talking about the stories that we tell ourselves around things that have actually happened to us. These stories can be used to justify, future behavior, past behavior. There are things that kind of we fill in, our brains fill in around the events that actually happened. For example, let's say that you set a goal. Doesn't matter what the goal is. It could be for work, it could be personal, whatever it is. And somehow you don't hit that goal, right? You don't hit it in the amount of time. You didn't, not enough progress has been made, whatever the case is. And you decide from that incident, I'm such a failure. I never hit these goals when I set them. I'm such a failure. I don't know why I try. I can't do this right. This isn't something I'm good at. That is a story that you're telling yourself around what actually happened. So when you feel yourself slipping into those stories, when you hear those things, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'll never stack up to, the people around me, I'll never have X, Y, and Z, I don't deserve. When you hear yourself talking to yourself in that way, or even speaking out loud to other people in that way, really take some stock. And actually, stop, don't even take some stock. Take a deep breath, take a step back, and just breathe. What you want to do at this point is say a simple phrase and then ask yourself a simple question. And what that all amounts to, what works for me is, what happened, happened. I can't control the past. What can I do next? So look at this situation. We hit it, we set a goal, didn't hit it. That's what happened. That is all that happened. What happened is that you set a goal and you didn't hit it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a failure. That project might have been a failure. You may have failed at achieving that goal in your set amount of time, but that doesn't make you a failure. When we have these incidences, we tend to make it very personal. I'm a failure. And then that story, that's a big story, by the way, but that story leads to so many other stories. I'm lazy. I never do this right. I'm so stupid. I don't know why I thought I could make this happen. I'll never get to where I want to be in life. I don't deserve this opportunity. I'm not good enough. Stories beget stories beget stories, and all of a sudden you're living your life as this failure who doesn't deserve anything, and that's all you're going to see. Your brain is going to be acutely tuned to all the times where you don't make something happen that you wanted to happen for yourself. Every time you don't hit a goal, every time you miss an opportunity. Those things are going to stick out in your brain, and you're going to continue to tell yourself you're a failure, and you're going to continue to believe that. However, again, taking a step back and saying, okay, this didn't go well. I did not hit my goal. I can't control the past. I can't control the fact that I didn't hit my goal. What can I control now? Is this still something that I want to do? If so, how can I push forward on this and make this happen? So just think about that. Think about all the times you've told yourself something negative about yourself. Going back to the I'm a failure example. You not hitting that goal one time doesn't mean you're a failure. That's a story that you had on deck for any time something doesn't work out for you. And you've been telling yourself that story for years, most likely. So think about how long you've been living in that story. Think about all of the opportunities you may have missed, or good things about yourself you might not be focusing on because you're so wrapped up in the negative story that you're telling yourself. So again, when you feel yourself dipping into these stories, take a step back, take a deep breath. This will be some excellent time to do some of that reflection I talked about a few videos ago, and to really take stock of what happened. Maybe you didn't adequately prepare to meet this goal. Maybe you didn't prioritize the goal. Maybe you prioritized hanging out with friends or schoolwork or whatever else is going on in your life. Maybe you had other things to prioritize. You didn't prioritize the goal appropriately. Maybe the goal was too lofty. Now that can turn into an excuse real quick, but you have to be realistic and honest with yourself when you're asking these questions. Was the goal too lofty? If so, how can you adjust it to make sure you can hit the goal in the future? What kind of adjustments do you need to make maybe to be able to hit that goal? But basically, we're looking at what happened. You didn't hit it because you didn't prepare. Maybe, the timeline was off. You didn't prioritize. Any of these things could have happened. So then taking stock of that, what happened, now you know how to avoid those things happening in the future. If you didn't prepare adequately enough to meet this goal, now you know that you need to take some steps to prepare and before setting that goal so that you're setting yourself up for success. If your priorities were off, maybe now you know that you need to do some shifting. You maybe need to sit and look at your calendar, look at your schedule with a critical eye and actually plan time in to focus on the goal that you're trying to meet. All of these things will help you to maybe be successful in that goal in the future. And maybe if you're not successful the next time, then you step back again, look at what happened and figure out why. It's always about what you can do now. Past me had control over my past actions. Present me does not have any control over that. All I have control over is what I do right now. So you can say, well, I did have control over that. Okay, you did, but now you don't. So now you take what you do have control over, which is the present, and push forward. And now that's not to say that not hitting your goals doesn't have consequences. Maybe, you let someone down because you didn't hit this goal. Maybe, your reputation is at stake. If it happens enough, maybe even, it could cost you an opportunity or a job. It's not to say that, these negative life events, these negative things that happen to us or that we facilitate do not have consequences. But let's say you lose a job because, you haven't been hitting goals. That's another easy point at which to say, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, all of that, all of those stories that, I've already gone over. But what really all you have control over after you lose that job is what you do to bounce back and get the next one. Reflect what didn't work in that position. What was hindering you from reaching your goals? Maybe the job that you're working wasn't the job for you. Maybe there were other things that you could have done to better prepare for that job. Maybe you were on autopilot, I talked in my last video about, living on purpose and living your purpose and living with intention, being present. If you weren't present, maybe that was the problem. Maybe you were checked out and, it just maybe didn't matter to you as much. And you didn't realize how much it mattered until you face a consequence. Those things happen. What's important is to not fall back into your stories once the bad things happen. Consider, let's say you lose a job and you let yourself fall back into that story. I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. So now you're job searching. Now you're trying to figure out how you're going to, real life problems, how you're going to pay your bills. You know what I mean? All of that comes along with losing a job. It's supremely stressful. And I'm not saying it's easy. All I'm saying is if you're going to go back to your story, if you're going to go back to, oh, I'm a failure, oh, I'm not good enough, etc., that's even affecting your job search. That's affecting what jobs you apply for. You feel like you're not good enough to do some things. Even if you get an interview, it might even come off in how you're presenting yourself. If you feel like you're a failure, if that's your truth, if you're living in that day in and day out, that's what you're going to present to the outside world. So your stories have bigger ramifications than just kind of making you sad. They can completely affect how you move through the world. So I think a big question is, if our stories can be so detrimental to us, why do we cling to them? Because believe me, we all cling to our stories. And I think the answer to that is that stories can hinder us for sure. You know what I mean? They can have us moving through life in a way that isn't true to ourselves, isn't true to our abilities, and anything that comes along with that. But the other thing is that stories can also kind of make us feel good. And that's why we cling to them so much. Oh, I was bullied as a child, and so that's why I, exhibit XYZ behavior. Or, oh my gosh, I've been cheated on a lot in the past, and that's why I react to this thing in that way. Now, both of those things are true for me in particular. And so it's not something that hasn't happened, but they become stories when I use them to justify bad behavior. However, these stories are really relatable. And when you are going along your journey, going through life, and you find someone who just seems to get it, they've been through the same things as you, they understand, it's easy to fall back into those stories, one as a way to relate to people, but also as a way to kind of relinquish responsibility for whatever outcome, occurred from a certain situation. Relinquish that responsibility to the past. Relinquish it to the past. If I lash out in a jealous rage over something fairly insignificant with a partner, and I justify it with, well, I've been cheated on in the past, and, it's one of my triggers, that all very well may be true, but I'm still responsible for how I act on my feelings. I can't control my feelings, but I can control how I respond to them, how I act outwardly. But if you have a friend who's been there, going through some of these things with you, or who has had similar experiences, you might be talking to your friend about this situation and say, but I've been cheated on in the past, and that's why I reacted this way. And that other person might say, I know, I completely get it. You're doing everything right. You're doing the best that you can. But are you? Are you doing the best that you can? If you can name the problem, if I can say I lashed out this way because of my bad experiences in the past, then that means I know what the issue is. And I can either deal with that issue on my own or seek out resources to help me deal with that issue, whether I need to talk to friends about it, whether I need a life coach, whether I need a therapist, whatever I need to deal with my own internal issues. That's then my responsibility to move forward with that and to get out of that story. You know what I mean? My behavior is completely up to me, and it's not up to whatever situation I've been in the past. What happened. How can I control what comes next? So one of the ways I think to deal with some of these negative stories that we tell ourselves is to reframe them into something positive. So instead of, I act this way because I had a really bad childhood. It was really bad for me growing up, and so I just have all of these coping mechanisms. Instead of that, reframe it. I had a really rough childhood, but I'm strong. I got through it. I'm strong enough to get through that, and so I'm strong enough to get through whatever life has to throw at me in the future. That's a different story. That is drawing on your strength as opposed to anything negative. That's giving yourself assets as opposed to operating from some deficit where you see yourself, or a deficit that you see in yourself. You're giving yourself a boost instead of kind of holding yourself down. Now, I will say that stories are stories, and whether they're positive or whether they're negative, they can still have repercussions. One example I have of this is of a positive story that I was telling myself. In my last job, I, came into my role and kind of worked my way up the chain, became a little bit more of a leader, worked on my own leadership skills, managed a lot of different people, learned a lot from that. And in the last few years, felt like I was doing a pretty good job in terms of my leadership and management style. So something that people told me, I had this reinforced from both people I was leading, as well as other colleagues, as to how much I'd grown and how well I was doing in that arena. And there's always places to grow, but in general, I felt comfortable saying, I'm a good leader, I'm a good manager, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and I'm looking out for my people, I'm good at this. This is good. And I lived in that story for a long time, and for a while, it lined up with the truth, and that made sense. Again, I was having these thoughts reinforced by others. So fast forward to a little bit actually before I left that job, and somebody that he had been in my kind of supervisory chain for a long time. We had developed a really good relationship, and now it was kind of a direct report, if you will, to me. And we were having a check-in, and he seemed a little disgruntled, and so I was trying to poke and prod a little bit to see what was going on. What happened was that what came out of that conversation was him telling me, or asking me rather, did I still like my job? And the question took me aback. I asked him why he asked that, and he just kind of went into a few different ways where the way that my management style maybe had shifted, or maybe he had grown as a leader, it wasn't working for him. And I am so grateful that he had the courage, I think, to tell me that not only do we have a good relationship, but I was his direct supervisor. And so I felt good about the fact that he felt comfortable saying that to me, but I felt horrible. I mean, horrible about the fact that I was living in this positive story about myself and not seeing the reality as to where I may have been slipping, or where some things may have been falling through the cracks, or where my style wasn't working with his anymore. And as his manager, I had a responsibility to him to see that and to adapt. And that's not what I did. And that's what a good manager would do, but that's not what I did. And so I say all that to say, we worked through it. In the time that I did remain there, I think we got back on track, and I was able to be the person that he wanted me to be for him. At least I hope so. But again, that came from a positive story. I was telling myself, I'm a good leader. You're good at this, which was so drastically different from a lot of the time I did have that negative self-talk in the past, and still to this day. You're not good enough for this. You're not strong enough for that, whatever. But I was in such a good place, telling myself a good story as opposed to being present and understanding exactly what was actually happening with my people. So I just think it's safe to say that stories, again, while reframing a negative story in a positive way definitely helps, it helps to also stay attentive to the facts. Again, I'm strong. I got through that. I'm strong enough. That's a fact. That's a thing that happened. I mean, I guess strong is subjective. But, you did get through your past. It's not saying you're the best person ever. You're not telling yourself a story necessarily around that. I got through that. So what ways did I get through that? Hopefully it'll help me get through this other situation. But going the complete opposite direction and telling yourself a positive story might not be the best way to get through either. Now, I will say, if a positive story is better than a negative one, as long as you're staying attentive to it. But I would implore you to just get out of your stories in general and focus on actually what is going on. So that means celebrate the good and feel the sting of disappointment when something bad happens. I'm not saying not to have feelings about it. I'm just saying not to get wrapped up in the stories you tell yourself about it. Leave the stories out of it. When you feel yourself drifting back into a story, simply say, what happened, happened. I can't control the past. And ask yourself, what can I do to make this better in the future? And then go do that. So that is the video. I hope that something said here resonated with you today. I hope that, wherever this is coming along in your journey, I just hope that it's helpful. So if you like this content, if you like this video, please give me a like, consider subscribing, hit me up in the comments on social media. I would love to continue this conversation with you all. But I'm going to say that that's all I have for this video. Thanks so much for being here. And that's it.